Group 2, and today we are going to talk about globalization. And I'll give you some basic structure of this presentation, and my classmates Lucia, Gemma, and Ben will give you more information about it. First, we'll give you our understanding of globalization and its general impacts on our life. And we also have some information about the effects of globalization on market environment. To address this topic deeper, we're going to tell you a story about this American pencil manufacturer Dixon and how it faces challenges of globalization and how it responds to it. And finally, we will give some advice for managers these days for how to survive under the background of globalization. And now, please check the label on your clothes. I mean, really, anyone checks the label on your clothes and answer me this question: where has it come from? Anywhere?
Mauritius.
Sorry?
Mauritius.
Russia?
Mauritius.
Russia. Okay, it's good. Any other place? India? Yeah. Any more? China. Yeah. Yeah, we have lots of this kind of example around our life. I mean, every kind of commercial products nowadays is imported or exported from outside, from overseas. So it's hard to give a certain definition for globalization, but we can feel it and we know it's have some impacts on our life and deeply, quickly, and in numerous levels.
So the obvious effect of globalization is actually the change in the market. So today there's a lot more importation from overseas compared to the last century. There's also an economic integration. So we see that some countries have got higher economically while others have crashed, like in Greece, for example. Also, the industry has become one of the biggest companies in the world, thanks to globalization. The world, thanks to that, has become a small village. Also, the lasting effects of globalization is immigration, global tourism. Global tourism also is one of the major industries in the world. So thanks to that, there's shared value and shared culture, but however, it would be not true to say that there is a uniform culture in the world. So we can see that one of the major key in globalization is the development in technology. In the last century, transportation and communication was like the same thing. And thanks to the development of telegraph, phone, and radio, and the latest one is internet since 1990. Those two have separated. So it helped big corporations multinational to be able to control and communicate in their huge company. Also, in the last century, the only who had the information about the market was the manager, thanks to newspaper and about the competition, the information about competition. But nowadays, thanks to internet, everyone can access it. Also, one of the other major key to globalization is the advancement in government deal agreements like NAFTA in 1992. And in Europe, the Schengen space, which appeared in 1985. It gave a sense of a single economy in Europe, which helped managers to have a single currency in it. It also helped the appearance of multinationals in the world. Moreover, we can see that globalization tends to bring lower price and lower cost, which was also one of the major goals of terrorism, and to increase productivity as well, which globalization have enhanced that.
Dixon is a US manufacturing company and was first affected by globalisation when the Chinese started importing cheaper pencils. The US's reaction to this was that they imposed heavy anti-dumping duties on these pencils being imported, so it's like more expensive. But then this was like didn't really have much effect because the Chinese continued to make cheaper pencils that were still of good quality. Then Dixon started to experiment with new materials. They used cheaper recycled materials, and then this would appeal to a certain market. It's like people were looking at ways to recycle and like save the planet and stuff like that. But then this still wasn't suitable, so then they chose cheaper materials from Indonesia. So then they started to embrace the change of globalisation, that it was happening, that they couldn't do anything about it. They also changed their pencils by getting, the end of the rubber on the end of the pencil. They got that from Korea. It was cheaper for them to import it from these countries, and it was obviously cheaper labour costs as well. They then made their boldest decision to get the manufacturing base in Mexico, so then that was a lot cheaper for them to import it in. And then they cut US jobs, and then they bought the Chinese subsidiary as well, and then they started to like have more of a presence in the pencil market and started increasing sales and not losing out to the Chinese companies as much.
One of the weirdest effects of globalisation has been the recent term McDonaldization, which was first coined by George Ritzer in 1971. And it's the idea that we now strive for efficiency, productivity, control, and it's using the term McDonaldization because it follows from McDonald's itself. The idea that they can produce a burger in, say, 5 minutes for a customer, that's exactly what we want for all of our products now, not necessarily in 5 minutes, but you want it so quickly and so efficiently and so cheaply, and you want to be able to calculate how much worth you're getting from that product and not actually focusing on the quality of it. And that's really where Dixon got its base wrong. It was trying to produce quality items, and when people actually only wanted cheap quantity items, so you want sort of 10 pencils for £1, and Dixon were offering pencils for sort of 2 for £5, but they were much better quality. And people didn't want that, they wanted much more cheap and quantity-based theories that we now see today. And you see it across the whole thing. If you go to Tesco's, Asda, anywhere like that, they're the best ones at looking at it for, because you'll get, say, I don't know, deals 2 for 3, 2 for 1, stuff like that. Everything is now about calculating how much you want from stuff, and also can you get it quickly, can you get it efficiently, and what's the cost of it. So from our research into this, what we would say is that, especially from the Dixon case study, that they had the opportunity to go into the global market. They had a much bigger footfall to appeal to, but they didn't choose to until much, much later than they really should have done. If they'd stepped out and they'd been able to take the manufacturing leap that they needed to, they would have been able to enter into a global market with a lot bigger footfall, and therefore make a lot more money from it. And the only other thing really for managers especially is to realise that you've got that global market, but there's also that competition. There's always going to be competition there, especially with the advent of being able to transport into different countries. You've really got to be careful that if you don't enter into that global market, like Dixon didn't until much later, that as the Chinese companies came in, they just undercut them, and even with anti-dumping laws, they were still able to undercut, and they started losing business. And it was only until Dixon started to change their tactics that they were able to use globalisation as a positive rather than a negative. But there are two less obvious ways, which are really based in culture. The first one is that when you deal with other countries, even if you are a small company and you're buying parts from, say, China or India, you've got to deal with the culture out there. You've got to know that they're not actually the same type of people as they are over here. It's one of the things that isn't very well understood at the moment. So Gert Hofstede and Trompenaars have been working on this. There's a lot of theory on this, and we didn't have a lot of time to get this into the presentation. But there is a lot of work being done at the moment in how to react with different cultures and how you're supposed to deal with the differences within cultures. The other point is that there is a lot of change that's moving very quickly. Is that 10? Thank you. There's a lot of changes moving very quickly, and it's a necessity to make sure that you're actually keeping up with that change. As soon as you get behind, that competition is just going to sweep in behind. But from the point that from our point of view, globalisation is not necessarily a good thing, nor is it a bad thing. You can use it for a lot of positives if you choose to accept it and to adapt to it. But the one thing that we'd like to stress is that it's a necessity for allowing us to grow as a population. By 2050, there's going to be 9 billion of us on the planet. If you take meat alone in its current demand, there will not be enough land to produce meat for us all to survive on it. Without globalisation, there is not enough world trade to sustain that. And you can take from that what you will.
Okay, so to conclude, globalization is deeply and continuously impacted our life. We are living in a flat world now. A lot of companies like Dixon are experiencing painful process to adapt to an ever-changing world. But globalization is also an opportunity for everyone. It brings wider markets and it creates plenty of ways of doing business. We can shift the products all over the globe now and get it for lowest cost. So the one thing we should do is to change the way of thinking in this world and to be prepared. And this is our presentation today. So, any question?
Thank you very much. Get the time on that, Jake.
11 minutes. Do I finish?
Yeah,
filming
we
now?
can finish it now, yeah.